Welcome to Knightline Extra on the award-winning Knightline Sports Network.
All right, welcome into another edition of Knightline Extra, only on the Knightline Sports Network. I am Adam Eaton, and we will take you through a little preview edition for UCONN. You're going to see a lot of Knightline sports favorites. Trace Trylko's on this show. UCF Mike's on this show. Andrew Phegley gave us some clips. Jeff Allen gave us some stuff. I'm going to start calling this the Knightline Super Friends edition. I suspect Andrew will hate that, though, so nobody tell him. A couple of things that we're going to talk about here off the top. Obviously, we're coming off of a tough loss against Pitt, 35-34. I think we've all had the opportunity to purge and to grieve. And if you listen to the Knightline show or the Sons of UCF show this week, hopefully you're able to get through it just like we were. And now we welcome in a familiar foe, but maybe a foe for the last time. We'll see. UConn coming to town. UConn, of course, is vacating the American Conference and heading to the Big East in all sports except for football. Randy Edsall said this week maybe we get on the schedule in the future, but that remains to be seen. But what is seen is a scheduling announcement this week. So if you haven't heard, a couple of news and notes items here. UCF has inked deals with both Boise State and BYU. So we will play Boise at home to start off the 2021 season, and the return trip there will be in 2023. We'll also welcome BYU to the Bounce House in 2023 and a return trip to Provo in 2024. So a couple of big scheduling announcements. I know these have been rumored for a long time, and so we'll eagerly await these dates. The national media seem to take pretty well to this. I think the Boise schedule is certainly something that'll be interesting. We'll see where both programs are, and just in terms of conferences and standings at that point in time. But those are certainly interesting games. And call me a conspiracy theorist here, but Danny announces these games on a Monday. So really the entire sports world was talking about UCF and talking about our loss, and there was some grieving and some fingers and some people laughing. And then whether or not this was planned, I don't think we'll ever know. But Danny all of a sudden changes the conversation, and 24, 48 hours later, all people are talking about now is our schedule, and the Pitt news seemed to kind of die on the national waiver wire. So maybe a genius move by Danny White, who knows? But I'll for one give him credit for whatever subterfuge he was planning. But so great news and notes, good schedules ahead. Obviously UConn is coming up. So on this episode of the Knightline Extra vehicle, you will hear from a UConn insider. Alex Putterman will walk you through what's happening with UConn, kind of state of the program, and yes, I had to ask about the Civil Conflict Trophy. Our very own Trace Trylko hopped on the American Conference coaches call, and we hear some quotes from both Randy Edsall and from Josh Heupel. And then last but certainly not least, my guy UCF Mike joins us to give you 5 things that you need to know about UConn. Make sure you keep it right here, and we'll be right back right after this with UConn insider Alex Putterman.
Hey, this is Travis Dever, Kai's Real Estate, the Dever team, New Smyrna Beach. Your source for real estate and everything else New Smyrna Beach. Proud sponsor of Knightline and Knightline Postgame Live. Call me anytime at 386-690-1636. That's 386-690-1636. Let me show you my hometown, New Smyrna Beach, UCF's favorite beach. Go Knights and charge on.
Oviedo Brewing Company is the hottest microbrewery in Central Florida. Located 7 miles from UCF at the Oviedo Mall, this 8,800 square foot brewery just opened its doors 6 months ago and has already crafted 13 unique beer flavors and counting in their tap room. The tap room contains different styles of beverages, including ciders, wines, and craft sodas. Not only do they have amazing beers, they also have a full kitchen with gourmet pizzas, wings, and tacos. Oviedo Brewing has activities for each day of the week, such as Taco Tuesdays, Trivia Wednesdays, Pizza and Pint on Thursdays, plus live music on Friday and Saturday evening. But the best is Sunday brunch with unlimited beer mimosas. Need a spot for game day? Oviedo Brewing is just the place with their large TVs to catch all the live games. You'll also find Oviedo Brewing at UCF tailgating sampling beers. And OBC support for the Knights doesn't stop there. If you need a spot for UCF away games, come to Oviedo Brewing Company. You can get all the details on their Instagram or Facebook page. Follow them at Oviedo Brewing CO. Download the Untapped app, and you can find out what beers are on tap. The food menu is also available on their website, oviedobrewingco.com.
All right, UConn coming to the Bounce House this Saturday. And to learn more about what's happening in UConn football this season, happy to have Alex Putterman, reporter from the Hartford Courant, on the line with us. Alex, thanks for joining us here on Knightline Extra.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, let me start here. So obviously we're familiar with UConn, conference foes and whatnot. But since the last time we played, a lot of changes maybe in and around the football program. So let me start big picture with you. Can you just kind of help us understand sort of the mood and the tenor around UConn football right now? And for those who aren't familiar, obviously, UConn announced that they would be moving into the Big East and essentially would not be playing an American football conference schedule any further. So potentially the last meeting between UCF. I know there's rumors about where UConn will play next year and conferences. So can you just kind of give us some insight on what this season's been like and what you've observed so far in and around the program?
Sure. So in 20 sports, UConn will be joining the Big East, but the Big East doesn't support football, so that leaves the football program kind of out in the wilderness. They have announced that they will be independent next year. There are 5 or 6 other independent programs, and they feel like they can build a good schedule and kind of keep the program afloat in independence. Obviously, that comes with some obstacles, but I think fans are kind of enthusiastic. UConn fans, for various reasons, didn't really embrace the American. I think they were kind of bitter about how conference realignment went, didn't feel kind of a connection to some of the schools. And I don't know whether that was fair or unfair, but that was just kind of how it was. And so the idea of playing maybe a more local schedule and getting to choose their own opponents, I think has been appealing to a lot of people. I will say that the other day, Randy Edsall mentioned that there have been talks with UCF about getting them on future schedules. And I know that's kind of appealing to UConn because Randy likes to recruit in Florida, and the idea of playing a Florida school or two is appealing to them. So it definitely wouldn't surprise me if UConn and UCF wound up playing again in the future when UConn is an independent and trying to build their schedules from scratch.
Yeah, probably not relevant for this year's game, but I'm just curious. So what, if anything, has this done for sort of recruiting for next year? Obviously, current players probably aren't going to be able to share much about their feelings, but with this announcement, has it impacted sort of recruiting and sort of next year's plans from that perspective?
Yeah, it's hard to know because, a couple of recruits have committed. There wasn't a big wave of decommits or anything, which I think was probably a positive sign. I don't know that you commit to UConn specifically to play in the American in the way that, you commit to Arkansas to play in the SEC. So I don't know if it will have too much of an adverse effect. From everything that we've heard, it sounds like UConn is building a respectable schedule for future years. They're hoping to play a few Power 5 teams a year. And so I think there's still something to kind of sell recruits on. They're going to have to figure out a TV deal, which I'm sure will be a selling point for recruits. But I don't think it'll be catastrophic. I mean, it probably requires, but, again, especially in the Northeast, I don't know if people were really committing specifically so they could play against, Tulsa and East Carolina. And UCF obviously is a high visibility program, but, it's possible that UConn can get UCF on future schedules and can also get, they just signed a home and home agreement with Maryland, and they have some with Boston College and Duke and Illinois and Indiana and Purdue. I think that's what they're going to kind of be selling recruits on. And I don't mean to, sound like a snob. I know UConn fans kind of have that reputation within the American, but I think that's just kind of the mindset of the program and of the fan base.
You talked about Randy Edsall for a second. How would you assess his second go around with the program? Obviously, a lot of challenges, and he left a program that was way different than the one he returned to. How would you kind of assess how he's performed in his second tour of duty there with UConn?
Well, obviously the results have been rough. I mean, 3-9 the first year, 1-11 last year, 1-2 so far this year. He has said from the beginning that when he took over, he felt that the cupboard was just kind of bare. He has, in a very, very thinly veiled way, kind of criticized his predecessors for kind of not maintaining the program that he sort of developed his first time here. And I'm not really in a position to say whether that's fair or not. He says that the players he inherited weren't really up to the level of play, and it's hard to know because they haven't really gotten to show it or not show it on the field very much. So everybody, I think, obviously some fans are frustrated, but at the same time, there's been a certain amount of patience from the athletic department and from many fans. he said he thinks this is a 5-year rebuild project. We're now in year 3. The roster is now mostly his players, but a lot of them are still young. So he's got a longer leash than I think a lot of coaches would have in his position. It's certainly, you can't say that his second go round has been a huge success, but at least some people are willing to kind of wait a couple years before they're really willing to call it a failure. Because I will say, it did take him a while, his first time in Connecticut, to build UConn from an FCS program into a kind of perennial bowl team. And so, we'll find out soon enough, I guess, whether he can kind of do that again.
How is this game perceived, from a UConn standpoint? So for UCF fans, we've kind of switched roles in some respects right now. Now we're the hunted as much as, we're used to being the hunter. And we saw last week we went into Pitt and they were fired up to play us and we got their best effort. From a fan perspective, even from the players inside the program, how big a game is this? And I guess how ready, how amped up do you think they're going to be to come down and face UCF?
Yeah, there's no doubt they'll be amped. The last time I checked, the spread was 43 points, which, you don't see a lot of conference games that have 43-point spreads. So I think, we do a weekly podcast at The Current called UConn Insider. And we were saying today, you almost have to throw out this coming game when evaluating UConn because we just know it's going to be a huge mismatch. Obviously, the talent, the pedigree on the two sidelines is just not even going to be close, as that 43-point spread indicates. I'm sure the players will use that as, bulletin board material and, say we're going to shock the world and all that kind of stuff. And they say they're not intimidated. And of course they've played UCF before, the ones who've been here for a few years. So, I believe that. But at the end of the day, I think everybody kind of knows that this is not a fair fight. And, maybe on Saturday I'll be proven wrong, but the odds makers and, I think everybody with their head on straight kind of realizes that this one has the potential at least to be ugly.
All right, let's take it on the field for a second. I'm probably going to butcher this name. So freshman quarterback Jack Zergiotis?
Yeah, that was pretty good. I think it's a soft G, but honestly, I'm still trying to figure that myself.
Well, we're trying to figure out what kind of player Jack is. He's a true freshman. It looks like it was a 2-star recruit. No touchdown passes on the season. Again, I know he was young and I guess from what I can understand, he wasn't necessarily tapped to be the starter from the get-go of the season. So what can you tell us a little bit about Jack and the kind of player he is and what we can expect?
Yeah, it's been in the just few weeks that we've kind of gotten to know Jack, it's been kind of a big up and down because he was nobody in training camp. He was the third string guy. There was a competition between a couple other quarterbacks, and Jack was not even really on the radar. If you told me before the season, what are the chances that Jack Zergiotis is going to start, I would have said, well, he's just not. He's a true freshman. There are other guys in front of him. The starter kind of stumbled in the first game, and then Jack got the kind of surprise start in game 2 against Illinois, and he looked pretty good. He made some costly mistakes, had 3 turnovers, but he also threw for 275 yards. He was comfortable throwing the ball down the field. He found receivers in tight coverage. It was a pretty impressive performance, and there was kind of a bravado, gutsiness to it that UConn quarterbacks haven't always had. So there was a lot of optimism about him after that game. And then last week against Indiana on the road was just kind of a disaster for him. He only threw for 90 yards. He had a terrible pick 6. And, some of that is probably attributable to the fact that he was in his first road game. But it was kind of a reality check for everybody who was getting really excited about him. This is a freshman. This is a guy who was a third-string quarterback just a few weeks ago, and he's probably not the answer to all the problems. It'll be interesting to see in road game number 2, but against, a better team than he faced last time, if he can bounce back, look a little bit more settled, and look more like the guy we saw in his first start than the guy who really struggled in start number 2.
And let's talk about the running game for a second. So first week against Wagner, 234 yards on the ground, and then the next 2 weeks, only 61 yards combined. Obviously, a part of having a young quarterback is supporting him with skill players and nothing better than a great running game. What worked initially for the running game, and where do you see that sort of coming into UCF based off the struggles the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, this is a part of the season that's been kind of surprising to me, more than surprising, or kind of shocking, that there are they're something like 122nd in the country in rushing yards per game. And that was supposed to be a strength coming into the year. They have a guy, Kevin Menso, rushed for 1,000 yards last year. They got this transfer from Toledo, Art Tompkins, and then they were returning 4 starters on the offensive line. And so going into the year, the run game was supposed to be a strength. And in the first game, it was a strength. And it was funny, a couple days after that first game, Randy Edsall was asked about the offensive line, and he said he just wasn't happy with the offensive line at all, which took me aback a little bit because they had rushed the ball pretty well in the first game. But then it kind of became clear that he knew what he was talking about, because these last 2 weeks, it's always hard to know how much to blame the backs and how much to blame the line. But the running backs didn't seem to have anywhere to go, really. And it's, become a huge problem. You want to take some pressure off the freshman quarterback. But if there aren't holes for running backs to get through, there's not much they can do. So that will be definitely interesting to see how that plays out, because, they had success against Wagner, but Wagner is a kind of below average FCS team. You want to be able to see that against a real opponent. And, it's going to be a long year on offense if they can't run the ball.
How about on the defensive side of the ball? So interesting if you look statistically at UConn. So they've given up 30 points a game, but they're really a top 20 defense. If you look at it from total defense stats, they've only given up a little over 970 yards a game. What can we expect from the UConn defense? Are they a team that's given up 30 points, or are they a team that's kind of stingy giving up yardage?
Yeah, well, so the giving up 30 points is actually misleading, because they've thrown 2 pick sixes this year. Okay. UConn has. So that, takes away 14 points total. So I don't know my math, it brings it down to 25 points a game. And yeah, it's been a lot better. I mean, you guys probably know that last year UConn's defense was beyond bad. It was historically bad. It was awful. And UCF was one of many, many teams that really just tore apart UConn defensively. And this year has looked really a lot better. It's almost the exact opposite, whereas last year the offense was kind of competent and the defense was a disaster. And this year has been kind of, the exact opposite. They added some guys, a grad transfer from Notre Dame, DJ Morgan, who's made a big difference on D at middle linebacker. They added some junior college transfers. And then a lot of the guys who were playing last year as freshmen or sophomores are now a year older, year more experienced, and it's kind of making a difference. They forced a lot of turnovers this year, or at least a handful, which is something they didn't do at all last year. Last year, they just got creamed on big plays. It was like every drive would end in a 60-yard touchdown. It was kind of depressing. And this year, they've only allowed 2 30-plus yard plays, all year. I think they and UCF are both among the national leaders in fewest 30-yard plays allowed. So it's been really different. I wouldn't, be surprised if they slip back into last year's habits to some extent. I don't know if they're going to be a top 40 defense all year. I wouldn't necessarily bet on that, but it's definitely been a lot better.
Give us the name of a player, either on the offense or defense, that you and I haven't talked about yet, that you think could do something on Saturday. Maybe somebody we're not expecting, or kind of a big time player that you hope or expect might have a big game this weekend.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll give you one on offense and one on defense just to round it out. On offense, let's say Ardell Brown, who's a grad transfer receiver who hasn't had, they talk really highly of him, and he put up really big numbers in Division II last year. He hasn't really had his breakout yet this year, and he was hurt for the first game, and the quarterback situation has been what it's been. But he's a really fast guy, a talented guy, and I would, if the passing game is going to get going, I think he could be a potential target. On defense, I'll say safety Tyler Coyle, who's one of the more veteran guys and also one of the more talented, super athletic, had a pick six against Illinois, was UConn's leading tackler last year, which was in part because so many ball handlers were getting through the first 2 levels of the defense. But, Tyler is a really good player overall and a potential kind of big play threat on defense.
All right, I tried to get through the entire week without talking about this, but since I have you, I guess I have to ask this question. The Civil Conflict Trophy.
Yeah.
Again, it's obviously gotten a lot of fodder in the national media. Everyone has kind of had their fun with it. obviously the UCF folks never necessarily embraced it. I know it was more of a Bob Diaco invention. How does the civil conflict trophy kind of play in UConn? Is it kind of funny these days? Is it still brought up? I mean, how do fans and sort of the players react whenever that question comes up, which it always does this week of the year?
That's funny because I was going to ask you the same thing. And so after I answer, I want to hear what you have to say on that. I don't even know if the UConn players really know or care about it, especially because it's such a young team. Not that many of them were even around when Diaco was around. In terms of the media and the fans, it's brought up constantly. The jokes never stop. A couple years ago, a colleague, Jeff Jacobs, wrote a piece trying to find the trophy itself. He was unable. He called and emailed and reached out to every single person he could, and the trophy has just disappeared. It's probably in a landfill somewhere. But as for the rivalry itself, I mean, I think it's just kind of an amusing thing. I don't think anybody really takes it seriously. I think it's extra funny considering that UCF, I mean, when that was starting, UCF was kind of nothing, and now it's obviously a ranked team and a national powerhouse to some extent. And so it's kind of funny from that perspective. Like, Diaco in a way had good instincts. Like, imagine if that had caught and UConn would be associated with this team that has lost 2 games over the last 3 years or whatever it is. It was kind of a sharp thing in retrospect. But I think people mostly just laugh about it and laugh at Diaco was kind of a ridiculous guy, and there are all kinds of jokes to be made at his expense, and that is kind of foremost among them. But I'm curious, how does that play with UCF?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the administration and sort of the coaches never really bought into it. I think famously we left it on the bench after the game in 2017. Yeah. I think that's the last maybe known photo of it, if I have the Zapruder film broken down correctly. So the administration never really embraced it. I think the fans, to your point, it's kind of a funny little gig. Like, all week on Twitter, you've seen people kind of saying this one's for the big one, and it's a picture of the trophy. I think it's kind of one of those where it's certainly a good joke. We never really took it, I don't think, very seriously. To your point, I mean, there wasn't ever really a natural rivalry. We have a pretty natural rivalry with our friends to the southwest there in Tampa. So I don't think we ever bought into it as a rivalry. But every week it comes out on Twitter. People post the stories. I think Bleacher Report did a story. I think Barstool does a story every year on it. So I think we get some fun off of it, but it was never something I think we took really seriously. And it was kind of head scratching. I think we're in the same boat. We're like, why is he starting a rivalry with us? Like, sure, we're in. And then, I think, but the administration, George O'Leary wanted no part of it. Scott Frost wanted no part of it. And I think Heupel was asked about it last year, and, Heupel's not much of a talker, if you've ever heard him speak, so I don't think he offered a ton of perspective on it as well. So I try to go through the entire week without asking about it, but since I have
you got to. And Randy Edsall, when he first got here, was asked about it, and he said something like, I don't want to talk about that. He just shut that entirely down. I wonder how long fans will keep making the jokes on Twitter and keep laughing about it. Will that, go on forever? I guess as long as UConn and UCF are playing. When Randy said this week that he thinks that, the matchup could continue into the future, I saw a lot of people saying the civil conflict will continue. So we'll see.
All right, so we'll end on this note. I hate to ask predictions because, none of us really know what the score will be. So I usually ask it this way. So if UConn is going to win this game, they will need to do what?
Oh, man. Like poison UCF? No, I shouldn't say that. No. I mean, look, football, crazy things happen. There are turnovers. I mean, who knows? They could get 3 kick return touchdowns or something, or interception returns or something. I mean, it would take, some kind of miracle. Everything would have to go right. Jack Zergiotis would have to, take 4 steps forward, and the defense would have to be, next level solid. It's really hard to imagine that one, but I will say that for UConn, I think in a lot of games this year, the goal is just to kind of stay close and look like they belong on the same field as some of these sort of more accomplished opponents. And so that's kind of how I think UConn people will be judging this game.
And then I'll ask the converse. If UCF is going to beat UConn, they will have done what?
They will have shown up. Any number of different things. I think if 9 things go right for UConn, it still isn't enough. There's just, I think at this point, a talent discrepancy. Randy wasn't shy about saying after the loss to Indiana, that was a better team than we are. That was a Big Ten team, and we're not at that level. And I think the same thing just clearly applies to UCF. So hopefully no UConn players hear me saying that. But it's college football, and anything can happen, and you never know who stayed up too late the night before the game or something and is going to come out and play flat, because college kids are college kids. But, I've got UConn to cover the 43-point spread, but that is really not saying very much.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of folks around here, so there's certainly some hurt feelings after what happened for us last week at Pittsburgh. There's some talk about the guys are laser focused this week, and some people are saying I wouldn't want to be UConn this week. UCF's on a mission now. They have zero margin for error and that kind of stuff. So curious to see what kind of response UCF comes out with as well, because it's been one of those weeks where we haven't had a loss, regular season since 2016. So kind of the preparation and how they focus this week will be really interesting to see how they come out. And the last one for you, is it true? I think I read someplace that Randy Edsall had him practicing indoors in like 95-degree heat to simulate. Is that accurate? Yeah,
he did mention that, and we got to watch part of that practice, and it was warm in there. We'll see if that if that makes a difference. I was wondering why they were practicing indoors. It was a beautiful day out. I didn't get it, but then that made some sense.
All right. Well, again, Saturday night, 7:30, ESPN2, I believe, is the television outlet you can watch UCF and UConn. And Alex Putterman from the Hartford Courant. Again, you can find him at Alex Putterman on Twitter. Alex, thanks for the insight, man. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, with UConn coming to town, we had an opportunity to listen in on the American Conference Coaches Call this past week, and our very own Trylko, famously of the Knightline show, was able to sneak in and get a few questions to Coach Randy Edsall from UConn on the game this upcoming week. So let's listen into the Q&A with Trace and Randy Edsall.
Good morning, Coach. UCF's 25-game winning streak is snapped in Pittsburgh. As a coach, how much do you appreciate just how difficult it is to go perfect for as long as UCF did?
Well, I think it's very difficult, and you give UCF a lot of credit. I mean, to be able to stay focused and have a run like that, for that long, says something about their players, their coaches, in terms of their approach and how they do things, and that's hard to do. And they came within a whisker of just keeping that streak alive, and competed very hard. And I know they probably felt like they had their chances to win that ball game against Pitt, but just came up a little bit short. But I have a tremendous respect for Josh and his staff and their players in terms of how they go about things and what they've been able to accomplish.
And when you see how UCF lost, do you see opportunities for your team in Saturday's game?
Well, you study the tape and you see certain things about how some people, how they beat them, and but now can your players do those same things that the Pitt players did, and does that fit with what you're trying to do? The big thing for me is always just for our guys to go out and play as hard as we can and execute to the highest level, and then hopefully the ball bounces your way and you got a chance to win. Because you can only, to me, having been in this for so long, is that you take what your kids can do and you evaluate what the other team is all about, and you just try to put your kids into the best position you can and have them go out and play loose and have fun and let the chips fall where they may at the end of the day.
All right, and on that very same conference call, our very own Josh Heupel was asked for his kind of opening remarks on the Pitt game and sort of what he thought about opening up the season here in an American Conference play with UConn. And here's what Coach Heupel had to say.
Yeah, obviously, players and coaches disappointed in the outcome of the game. Some things that you typically can't do. Lots of turnover battle, and then some penalties late in the ball game too that hurt us and didn't win the special teams. So you do that. It's tough sometimes to come out with the win. really proud of our football team and the way they competed. Got down early, no one blinked, rallied together, and continued to fight and play extremely hard. And so proud of that. And our kids were excited back in the building here and ready to get started with conference play.
All right, what you heard there, obviously, was Coach Heupel, staying on message, talking about his 1-0 mantra. It was interesting listening to those all those audio clips, and I went through a bunch. And really for Coach Heupel, the questions were largely about looking back at Pitt and in typical Heupel fashion. He talked about looking forward and having a chance to play a UConn team at home this week. So certainly not a lot of banter back and forth, but we shall see what Coach Heupel has drawn up for us this week. Again, Saturday night in the Bounce House. And look, you've learned a lot about UConn. You've heard from Randy Etzel, who you haven't heard from yet on this Knightline Extra Super Friends edition, is our very own UCF Mike, and he joins us next to give you 5 things you need to know about UConn.
Spice up your company with homemade marketing services from Tasty Gravy Creative. Tasty Gravy serves up a menu of budget-friendly marketing, graphic design, and public relations services customized to your specific goals. Co-owned by a UCF graduate, Tasty Gravy can help refresh your brand, strengthen your online presence, or reinforce your company's message. Contact Tasty Gravy for help with your website, social media, marketing, advertising materials, and more. Visit tastygravy.com.
You've heard us talk about the great food at our good friend Kyle Israel's restaurant, The Little Greek Fresh Grill. The Little Greek now has franchises available. Please call 407-697-2272. That's 407-697-2272 to see what The Little Greek can do for you. Also, check out The Little Greek's newest location at 6536 Old Brick Road in Windermere, Florida. The Little Greek Fresh Grill. Fresh, flavorful, fabulous.
All right, pleased to be joined by my partner in crime on the Sons of UCF. It is UCF Mike, and he is here to help me review or preview 5 things you need to know about UConn. So UConn coming to the Bounce House Saturday night, 7 p.m., ESPN2. Make sure you tune in. Make sure you're there if you have tickets. We played UConn a bunch. They've obviously been a part of our conference for a while, so they're somewhat familiar to us, Mike, but a few things that maybe they need to know about UConn. So do you want to take the first one that they need to know?
Sure. First thing you need to know is these guys suck.
Okay. All right.
Okay, the serious thing you need to know is they are starting a true freshman quarterback against us. His name, I think I know why you gave me thing number 1, because I don't know if I can pronounce this name.
Yeah.
Jack Zergiotis?
I think it's Zergiotis. I think you're correct. I think there's a pronunciation guide on the internet. I think it's Zergiotis.
All right, Zach Zergiotis. I didn't know that because I haven't watched him play yet, so it's not like I've heard his name. This guy, I don't know if he knows he's played yet either, because he hasn't thrown a touchdown yet this season. However, he does have 3 interceptions. Jack Zergiotis is a 2-star recruit. When he wins his first game, he will be the first true freshman quarterback to win a game at UConn since the legendary Dan Orlovsky in 2001. I only remember Dan Orlovsky for stepping out of bounds.
Yeah. He's on ESPN now, but that's the only thing to know about Dan Orlovsky is that he ran out of the back of his own end zone.
Yeah, when the Lions were 0-16 that year.
Yeah.
Now, Jack Zergiotis, he did throw for 275 yards against Illinois in week 2.
All right, that sounds good.
He followed that up with a 90-yard performance in last week's loss at the hands of Indiana.
Yeah, not so good. So you're telling me this Zergiotis guy isn't really lighting it up?
Not yet.
Okay.
He's a true freshman, and we better not give up his first passing touchdown, because then I'm going to be pissed.
Okay. Well, we don't want that. So here's a second fact. So week 1, Mike, against Wagner, which was formerly the school where former UCF quarterback Rob Calabrese was the offensive coordinator. He's not there anymore. Against week 1, UConn rushed for 234 yards, Mike, against Wagner. They really just churned up some yards on the ground, right? That means we're probably in for a formidable rushing team this week, right? Not so fast.
Yeah, well, we just said that they're not throwing any touchdowns. So
yeah, well, not so fast. So since that 234-yard performance in week 1, the last 2 weeks they've run for a combined 61 yards.
Thanks.
However, when they do run the ball, Kevin Mensah, I think that's how you pronounce this guy's name. He's their primary back. He's got 2 rushing TDs on the year. However, since Mike already kind of let the cat out of the bag, there is no receiver that has caught a touchdown this season because nobody has thrown one to them. It looks like they spread the ball around a little bit if they're going to throw the ball. Art Tompkins and Jay Rose are some names that you might hear this upcoming weekend. Either way, as an offense, they're only averaging 16 points a game on the season. Mike, that's pretty offensive.
Yes, but that's more than Pittsburgh was averaging coming into the game last week. So,
what are you doing? What are you doing now?
Take that stat for whatever you want.
All right.
Thing number 3. This will be the 7th meeting between these two teams, UCF and UConn, with UCF leading the civil conflict series as a score of 4-2, and we've won 3 in a row now. UConn handed us one of our worst losses to date. The 2014 game, the Heater Gate game.
I added this fact in here specifically, Mike, because I know this one bothers you so much.
Oh, man, I don't know how we lost this game. This was not a year where UConn was like having a decent 4 or 5 win season. They were one of their typical horrible UConn teams, and we had a team coming off the Fiesta Bowl win. We were crushing everybody. I think we had won 5-6 games coming into that game in a row. And somehow these guys just, I think Holman had about 4 interceptions that game. But this may be the last time we play these guys, because who knows what's going to happen now with UConn leaving the American Conference. We do have some open dates in 2020 and some other years coming up, so maybe we'll get them back on the schedule. But this could be your last chance to see the Huskies in Spectrum Stadium for the civil conflict.
Yeah, throw out the records, right? I mean, save the programs, keep your ticket stubs. You're going to want to make sure you can tell your grandkids you were at the last time UCF and UConn strapped it up and played a game of tackle football for sure. All right, 4th stat, Mike. Here we go. UConn is coached by Randy Edsall, who, as some of you might know, is actually in his 2nd stint with the program. He was the coach there from 2000 to 2010. He left for Maryland in 2011, but returned to UConn in 2017. Sounds kind of weird, right? But he is among a list of recent coaches who have returned after leaving a school for another job, all of whom have really been less than stellar, and some of these actually have some interesting UCF ties. Mark Whipple, who you now may know as the offensive coordinator for Pitt, he was the head coach at UMass from 98 to 2003, and then went to the NFL and came back in 2014 before he got fired in 2018, where obviously he ended up at Pittsburgh's offensive coordinator, and we know how that turned out. Then there's our good old friend Mike Riley. He was the coach at Oregon State from 97 to 98 before heading to the NFL. He came back to Oregon in 2003 and was there until 2014 until he was hired away by Nebraska, where in 2017 he was promptly fired and replaced by Scott Frost. And then lastly, Bobby Petrino, the coach of Louisville from 2003 to 2006, went to the NFL. Then had some off-the-field stuff, Mike. You can probably Google some pictures of Bobby Petrino in a neck brace with some scars on his face. But he came back to Louisville in 2014 until this past season when he was fired. So, moral of the story is, good luck, Randy.
Yeah, good luck, Randy Edsall is right. Yeah, there's not much he can do this week. He's going to be in for it this week. You think these guys can win a couple games this year?
Probably not. I don't know how bad. I don't know if they play Tulsa. I don't have the schedule in front of me. I don't know.
You feel beat the Cows?
Probably not, man. I don't know. Is that at home or on the road? I don't know. You kind of feel bad for these kids, right? Because I mean, from what we know, they're going to drop down to Division II, whatever the heck they call it these days, FCS. And so you kind of feel bad for some of these kids who went to school there. There's a couple of kids, I looked it up, a couple of kids from Orlando who actually went to UConn. I'm not saying they were good enough to go to UCF or we recruited them, but you got to think there's some people who are scratching their heads like, I went to UConn and now this is happening to me. But I'll say I'll give them one win just to be nice.
All right. Well, hopefully it is the Cow game. That'd be nice. The last thing you need to know about UConn is they've had 39 players selected in the NFL draft. It's not bad. Only 2 first-rounders, though. Running back Donald Brown, who was drafted by the Colts in 2009, and defensive back Byron Jones, who was drafted by the Cowboys in 2015. So the question is, who is the best all-time player from UConn?
Great question.
Well, only one player has been on a Super Bowl team. That's offensive tackle Will Beatty from your New York Giants, although he was injured that year when they won the Super Bowl in 2011. But in 2017, he signed with the Eagles and won his second Super Bowl, even though he never played a snap that season either. So that seems about right for the UConn players.
Mike, I know you're a diehard Giants fan. Can you give us your favorite Will Beatty memory?
Well, maybe when he got hurt, so we can replace him and we went on to win the Super Bowl.
Okay, all right. So they have a player who's got 2 rings and has never been on the actual field for the Super Bowl. I'm sure that's happened before, maybe like a backup quarterback or something. But I guess I went through the list, Mike. I don't know who else is on that list to be their best player. I don't know who you think of when you think of UConn football. I'm not sure who pops in your mind.
I would have to see the list. I don't even know who they have. I just going by the names you just gave me.
Now, as a Cowboys fan,
I know those are Hall of Famers.
As a Cowboys fan, I can tell you Byron Jones is pretty good. He moved to corner this year. He's doing a pretty decent job for there. He was injured. Played safety his first couple of years. He's a decent player. So we'll see how he shakes out. I don't know if he can top the Will Beatty 2 rings thing, but UConn's storied football history produces Dan Orlovsky, Will Beatty, and Byron Jones, and I guess those are 5 things you need to know about UCF. If you need to know more about UCF, Mike here, make sure you check him out each and every Wednesday on the Sons of UCF. You'll hear all of his hot takes, all the cows of the week, and you'll also hear his weekly picks. This past week, he welcomed Mac Loudermilk to the show, so stick around to see who Mike brings on next week, only on the Knightline Sports Network. All right, my thanks to Alex Putterman from the Hartford Courant, to Trace Trylko from the Knightline Sports Network, and UCF Mike from the Sons of UCF for hopping on and giving us some of their time here on this Knightline Extra Edition, Super Friends Edition. Again, don't tell Andrew. Saturday night, 7 p.m., Bounce House, sold out. It's on ESPN2, so if you can't make it down there, you can certainly watch on TV. But here's the thing. If you can get down there, if you have tickets, I think this is an important one. Everyone who can and is able to go needs to be there, and let me tell you why. Not because we've got UConn coming and it's a big rivalry game, and although they are wearing UCF is wearing their military uniforms this week, which look pretty sweet from what we saw on Twitter. But if for nothing else, give these guys a swan song. Give these guys your appreciation for what they've pulled off the last 3 seasons. I think we all forget what UCF has done is largely unprecedented in college football. And I know that the program will never be the same. College football may never be the same. And all of us who've been a part of this ride will never be the same either. So if you can get out there and stand up and clap your hands and cheer for the guys. Let them know how much we appreciate what they've done for us. They've brought us so much entertainment, so much joy, and so much pride. The brand has never been stronger. I think it's without a doubt now that we are firmly a national brand. We're firmly in those categories, and we have these guys and our coaches and our administration to thank. So get out there on Saturday and show them your appreciation. Stand up, cheer, yell, scream, bring signs, let them know how much you've enjoyed what they've done, and that we're still behind them, and it's not over yet. All of our goals are still in front of us. And so we're not going anywhere anytime soon. Speaking of not going anywhere, the Knightline Sports Network is not going anywhere. You can hear a bunch of shows. So the Knightline flagship show, Sons of UCF, Jeff Allen's AAC report, and the latest addition to the family, our very own Andrew Phegley, has broken his way onto ESPN Radio 580 every Sunday morning, 9 a.m. with the morning after show. Call in, send your messages. Kyle Israel, I think, will be there most weeks, and you'll hear his insight, and you'll get a chance to talk about the game, vent, tell us what you think, tell us what you feel. But make sure you support that show. It's a pretty big deal to get a show onto terrestrial radio. So give Andrew and Kyle and whoever else is there your support as always. We will reconvene next week again. Make sure you download and you listen to all those shows, and we'll be back as a collective next week to talk about everything that we saw versus UConn. Until then, I'm Adam. This is Knightline Extra. Charge on.